Major funding for KPBS Evening Edition has been made possible in part by Bill Howe Family of Companies, providing San Diego with plumbing, heating, and air restoration, flood and remodeling services for over 40 years. Call 1-800-BILL-HOWE or visit billhowe.com. And by the Conrad Prebys Foundation, Darlene Marcos Shiley, and by the following. And by viewers like you. Thank you.
Tonight, President Donald Trump will deliver his first address to Congress since retaking the White House. Thanks for joining us. I'm Maya Trabulsi. He's expected to detail his whirlwind first 6 weeks in office while making the case for his sweeping domestic and foreign policy plans. Washington correspondent Julia Benbrook has a preview.
President Donald Trump is speaking to a joint session of Congress tonight.
He's going to level set with the American people about where exactly we are as a country, what's happened over this past 4 years, what he's been able to accomplish over the last 4 or 5 weeks, then what we still have yet to go.
Trump has made a whirlwind of moves since inauguration, announcing several rounds of tariffs on imports, firing thousands of federal workers in an effort to reduce the size of the federal government, and signing a flurry of executive orders, with several of those facing legal challenges.
This president is working so quickly. I invited him to come early in the process to give this joint address because there's so much to report to the people.
Trump believes he has a mandate from voters, but parts of his agenda will require help from Congress. And tonight's speech is an opportunity to rally Republicans who hold slim majorities in both chambers. Democrats, though, are pushing back.
People are rising up to push back against the assault on the economy, the assault on hard-working families, the assault on our democracy.
His speech comes as the country is greeting his goals with skepticism. A recent CNN poll shows that more Americans feel Trump's policy proposals are taking the country in the wrong direction than the right direction. At the Capitol, Julia Benbrook, KPBS News.
PBS News will provide live coverage of President Trump's address to a joint session of Congress tonight. It will include the president's speech, the Democratic response, and analysis from the PBS News team. You can watch it live here on KPBS starting at 6 o'clock tonight.
Well, we've had a little bit of a break from the stormy pattern today. Tonight we're dropping down to the low 50s, partly cloudy skies, and then tomorrow we see a return of that stormy pattern. I'll break it down for you coming up.
For a second day, the market's taking a big hit as President Trump enacts tariffs on America's 3 biggest trade partners. Stocks tumbling as fear grows that these tariffs will impact the American economy. Jen Sullivan breaks down what could cost more.
Same price for 40 years.
The price of a wide array of items will likely be going up soon. Everything from food to electronics. This comes as President Donald Trump's tariffs on 3 of America's biggest trade partners threaten a trade war. And caught in the middle could be American consumers.
There is no question that this is going to be hitting Americans in the next days, weeks, and months.
Goods coming from China will be subject to a 20% tariff. And goods coming from Canada and Mexico will be taxed 25%, with only a slim exemption for some Canadian energy products. Trump argues that open trade is costing Americans millions of jobs and says these tariffs will hopefully entice companies to move factories to the U.S.
What they have to do is build their car plants, frankly, and other things in the United States.
Mexico is the largest supplier of fruit and vegetables to the U.S., according to the University of California, Davis. The country is a top provider of tomatoes, avocados, raspberries, bell peppers, and strawberries. These are just some of the grocery items that are expected to cost more for American consumers.
Consumer prices are going to go dramatically up. So this is going to take a big hit on the American economy.
The tariffs are triggering a flurry of reaction from leaders in all 3 countries.
We will not back down from a fight. Not when our country and the well-being of everyone in it is at stake.
Both Canada and China retaliating against the U.S. and announcing their own tariffs on American goods. Mexico's president says she would also announce retaliatory tariffs. Jen Sullivan, KPBS News.
And we're learning more about how tariffs on goods imported from Mexico, Canada, and China could impact businesses and consumers in our region. Our media partner KGTV spoke to a small business owner in San Isidro who's worried these tariffs could be the last straw. For over 20 years, Carolina Shoe has been able to sell discounted footwear and clothing. The owner says that's because they were made and imported from China.
We're going to have to raise our prices that a lot of customers aren't going to want to pay, and they're not going to want to cross the border. That's just going to make business harder, especially not just for us, but everybody who has businesses in the border.
Carolina says the area is already suffering from a drop in customers due to COVID and partial closures of the Pedwest port of entry. San Diego is joining a lawsuit challenging the Trump administration's threats to withhold federal funding from cities and counties that don't cooperate with federal immigration enforcement. It alleges that withholding funds is unconstitutional and that during President Trump's first term, federal courts ruled against his administration on the same issue. San Diego, like the 15 other plaintiffs, describes itself as a, quote, welcoming city rather than a sanctuary city. The city attorney's office says it receives U.S. Department of Justice grant funding for law enforcement and public safety initiatives, which are at risk. A German tourist has spent more than a month at the Otay Mesa Detention Center waiting to be deported. Friends tell KPBS reporter Gustavo Solis that this has been a terrible ordeal, and they just want their friend to go home.
It was supposed to be a perfect reunion.
We were going to have a month of just making art. That was our plan.
That's Amelia Loving. She's a designer who recently moved to Los Angeles. Talking about her friend, Jessica Bruch, a German tattoo artist who was spending the winter in Mexico. They planned to spend the weekend in Tijuana, cross the border, and drive up to LA.
We had printed out her return ticket. She was supposed to fly the 15th of February back to Berlin.
But Bruch never made it to LA. She's been in federal immigration custody since January 25th. That's the day they try to cross the border through the San Isidro port of entry.
They look at Jessica's passport, Jessica's ESTA, and then they're like, okay, she needs to go to secondary screening. And I was like, mm-mm. So I look at her, I'm like, I'm going to go right outside. I'm going to wait right outside for you.
Loving waited 2 hours before a Customs and Border Protection agent delivered the bad news. She says the agent accused Bruch of planning to violate the terms of her tourist visa by working as a tattoo artist.
And she's like, here's what's going to happen. Your friend is getting deported. And I'm like, okay, there's nothing we can do about that. She's like, no, she's getting deported. I'm like, okay, fine. What's going to happen? She's like, she's going to call you in a couple of days from Germany.
But that's not what happened. In fact, it would be 25 days before Loving saw her friend again. Bruch has spent the entire time in federal detention, where she's waiting to be deported. KPBS independently confirmed that Bruch is currently in federal custody. She was first detained by CBP and then transferred to the Otay Mesa Detention Center, which is run by Immigration and Customs Enforcement, or ICE. Neither agency would comment on the specifics of the case.
I'm a dumb artist. Sorry, I don't know what to do in these situations. I don't know where to look. I post online, hey guys, help me out. I can't find Jessica. This is what's happening. Does anybody know what they can do? And my social media goes crazy.
Those posts got thousands of views.
And I have an update about the German tourist, Jessica Bruch.
Est-ce que vous avez entendu parler de Jessica Bruch?
Her name is Jessica Bruch.
Die deutsche Tattoo-Künstlerin Jessica Bruch.
And using publicly available databases, online sleuths tracked her down to Otay Mesa. One of those posts caught the eye of Ashley Paskin.
I was actually just doom scrolling TikTok and came across a video.
Paskin lives close to the detention center.
At the end, she just said, is there anybody in the area that can put eyes on her and help? And I just messaged her.
Paskin says she's not a lawyer or an activist, but something about the story just grabbed her. So she went to visit Bruch.
I think mostly it was just the mom in me that was like, her mom hasn't heard from her and doesn't know where she is, and no one had any contact with her at all.
A few weeks later, and with Paskin's help, Luffing was finally able to see her friend again.
Finally, I can see Jessica. I was just like, oh my God. I was crying. I'm just like, I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. And she's like, stop saying sorry. It's not your fault. You didn't know.
And that's when Loving first heard about her friend's horrible experience in detention.
She says it was like a horror movie. Like, there's obviously people screaming from all the rooms around. Like, they're just feeding her food through like a little mailbox hole. And she says she didn't have a blanket, she didn't have a pillow. It's basically a yoga mat on the ground and a toilet in the corner.
Broche spent 9 days in that CBP facility, which appears to be a violation of the agency's own detention standards that say they're supposed to only hold people in those facilities for 72 hours. Again, CBP wouldn't comment on the specifics of the case, citing privacy concerns.
After 9 days, she says she started freaking the fuck out and punching all the walls. And then there's like blood everywhere.
Loving says she could see bruises on her friend's knuckles from that episode. Broche was transferred to the Otay Mesa Detention Center on February 2nd, according to a statement from ICE. And according to a separate memo from ICE, the average cost of detaining adult non-citizens is $164 per day. So detaining Broche for more than a month has cost American taxpayers roughly $5,000. That's a lot of money compared to a one-way flight from San Diego to Berlin, which cost between $500 and $600.
Why are the American taxpayers spending thousands of dollars detaining tourists who are perfectly willing to leave?
Immigrant rights activists say this story is an example of the country's broken immigration system.
It speaks to how inefficient this whole situation is.
That is Pedro Rios. He is with the American Friends Service Committee.
And the whole process is absurd. It doesn't make sense. There's a lack of appreciation for how to make things run smoothly. And in the process, people are suffering.
As of Monday, Broche was still in detention, and her friends have no idea when she's going home. Gustavo Solis, KPBS News.
I'm Amna Navaz. Tonight on the NewsHour, President Trump sparks a trade war by imposing new tariffs on Canada and Mexico. That's coming up at 7 after Evening Edition on KPBS. Carlsbad is looking to expand its snow camping ordinance tonight to include people sleeping in their cars. According to the 2024 point-in-time count, 56 people were living in their cars in Carlsbad, twice as many as the previous year. The city recently received a state grant to help people living in cars find shelter and permanent housing. The city has partnered with Interfaith Community Services to carry out that mission. Greg Angel is Interfaith's CEO.
The ban in and of itself does not solve homelessness. What solves homelessness is housing and resources to help people access that housing. Carlsbad is working with Interfaith and other providers to provide those resources as a part of their effort to also put in place new rules.
If passed, the amendment requires officers to give warnings and an offer of services before issuing a citation. A landmark housing program in the city of San Diego could be repealed today. The ADU bonus program aims to add more housing to San Diego by allowing people to build small apartments or homes on their property. Up to 4 accessory dwelling units or granny flats can be built on any residential lot. The program is supported by some, but others are concerned the program isn't working as intended.
You're going to build an additional dwelling unit in your backyard for your granny when she gets too old to care for herself. Okay, but that's not what this is. When you're talking about 12 units, 15 units, side by side, just stacked, 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 those are apartment complexes that are not zoned for that. The second part of it is that it disproportionately burdens those who are of lower income because the cheap land where people can just build as many as they want happens to be at a place that's disproportionately low income.
The Choice Valley Community Planning Group says their neighborhoods have become more crowded with the development of these units. They say it has also created parking problems. In January, Border Patrol agents from Imperial County arrested 78 people in Bakersfield. Officials described it as a highly targeted operation that took criminals off the streets. But KPBS reporter Gustavo Solis says a new lawsuit is challenging that claim.
It was called Operation Return to Sender. And on Twitter, Border Patrol Chief Agent Gregory Bovino called it a success, saying his agents, quote, arrested bad actors across Kern County. Now, the ACLU is suing Bovino and the U.S. Department of Homeland Security. The class action lawsuit alleges that the operation was a fishing expedition. Risa Velasquez Otis is an ACLU lawyer.
They detained individuals regardless of citizenship status. There were individuals that were permanent residents and citizens that were harassed, stopped, and questioned.
The lawsuit also alleges that Border Patrol agents violated people's Fourth Amendment rights by randomly detaining them without warrants or reasonable suspicion. The suit goes on to claim that Border Patrol agents held people in poor conditions and coerced them into signing documents that waived away their rights to a hearing in an immigration court.
They were concrete floors. They maybe had a bench that was made out of steel to sit on. The lights there are blaring day and night, so individuals are not able to sleep.
The Border Patrol did not make Bovino available for an interview. Instead, the agency issued a statement saying, quote, Border Patrol enforcement actions are highly targeted. Businesses that human traffic and exploit migrants for cheap labor should be afraid.
So we want to ensure that the courts do intervene to ensure that this doesn't happen again because it has terrorized the entire state.
The ACLU is asking a judge to return people who were deported through Operation Return to Sender. Gustavo Solis, KPBS News.
President Trump's address to Congress this evening follows numerous staff cuts in the federal government. KPBS SciTech reporter Thomas Fudge says cuts to NOAA, which runs the National Weather Service, are already being felt in San Diego.
Donald Trump has cut hundreds of positions at NOAA, the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration. NOAA management won't reveal how many jobs have been cut. But those in San Diego who work closely with the agency say the cuts will be felt by the public because of what NOAA does.
It's like predicting weather, both day to day and when the big ones come, like hurricanes and tornadoes. They help us to understand how many fish we can pull from the ocean and continue to do that both productively and sustainably.
Bryce Simmons is a marine biologist at the Scripps Institution of Oceanography at UC San Diego. He works directly with NOAA staff on a partnership that goes by the acronym CalCoffee, which gathers data in ocean-going vessels about fisheries, ocean chemistry, and pollution. Oceanographer Clarissa Anderson is also at Scripps. She says many of the people aboard those vessels have lost their jobs.
And last week, when these terminations began, all of the seagoing staff on the NOAA side that keep these 4-month-long cruises a year going were terminated.
The CalCoffee program began with the crash of the sardine population, which once fed a thriving industry in California. Today, Anderson says partnerships with NOAA are important to fisheries. They're also important to weather forecasting and to the Coast Guard, who rely on ocean current data for search and rescue.
So without them, you really would not have weather service models that work, one. And if you fall in the ocean, you are going to be found 40% later than you would have if we didn't have these data, because the Coast Guard requires these data in their models to tune them, to make them accurate so people can be found.
The National Weather Service is a part of NOAA. NOAA Public Affairs would not comment on whether any cuts have been made to San Diego's office. Thomas Fudge, KPBS News.
California state workers are headed back to the office after Governor Gavin Newsom's new executive order requires them to be in person at least 4 days a week, beginning July 1st. Andres Valle has the details.
Oh, no, I'm not excited.
I guess I don't mind going back to work 4 days a week.
State workers are reacting to the news of an executive order coming from Governor Gavin Newsom, requiring them to return to the office in person at least 4 days a week. Catherine Koch is a state worker who chose to return to the office 5 days a week before Monday's announcement.
I haven't seen any benefit to my own personal productivity being in the office 5 days per week, and frankly, I have no idea where they're going to fit everyone. Our floor is completely full on Tuesdays and Wednesdays.
She and many other state workers are raising similar concerns about the governor's order.
We downsized a few years ago and squeezed a lot more people in this building, and I'm not really sure where everyone's going to go.
Under the order, state agencies and departments must develop plans to accommodate the increase in in-person work. Governor Newsom says bringing workers back into the office will improve collaboration within state departments.
I know one of the things they're going to say about us coming back is for collaboration purposes, but honestly, we do a lot of collaboration on Microsoft Teams, and that works great.
Dan Sneed manages the restaurant Table Vine on 14th and O Streets, located between multiple state buildings. He says business has been slow since state workers aren't required to be in the office every day. but is unsure if it will benefit the restaurant once the order takes effect on July 1st.
I don't see a lot of our workers coming here at lunchtime. We'll see. We have to see. I don't know. Things have changed, so let's see what people will do.
Meanwhile, state workers worry this latest return to office order will impact morale.
I think we did see a hit with morale when they called us back in 2 days a week, and I think people have adjusted. But, you know, I do worry about losing good employees and good colleagues who maybe live farther away.
Well, we're going to have another storm on the way starting tomorrow, and this enters us into another kind of stormy pattern. We already have some alerts that have been issued. I'll break all of these down, and the roller coaster temperatures some of us are going to see. Let's start things off with temperatures for tonight. Most of us in the 40s, 45 in Oceanside. We're in the 50s for San Diego. Mount Laguna down in the 30s, just shy of 40 degrees there, down at 32 in Campo. Now, we have a mix of sun and some rain, depending on where you are for tomorrow. So along the coast, Oceanside, we're going to see the rainfall, 63 degrees. Same situation in San Diego. As we head further inland and especially up into the mountain regions, we're a little bit warmer, 74 in Borrego Springs, 50 in Mount Laguna, and we're not really dealing with the rain yet. We are going to see precipitation come in, just not quite tomorrow. There's going to be 2 waves to this storm, Wednesday and then Thursday, and it's really Thursday that we start to see the snowfall especially. We'll see snow levels drop to about 4,500 feet, and we'll see some accumulating snowfall. But let's break this down on future radar, starting with the rain, right? So we're going throughout Wednesday. By the time we get to 10:30, we start to see some rain moving down into Southern California, but not quite to the San Diego area quite yet. That comes a little bit later into the afternoon, almost towards the evening, when we start to see some of that rainfall down towards San Diego. This continues as we head into Thursday, and then we have another round of it. This is 7/19 Thursday evening. We see a little bit of a mix of types of precipitation here as this heads a little bit further inland. Like I mentioned, with the snow that we're going to see, here's those winter storm watches that have already been issued. And then we have more storms on the way next week. Let's take a quick look at your 5-day outlook for the coast. We're in the 60s across the board. Taking a look further inland, we bounce up to the 70s by Saturday, then back to the 60s. Taking a look at your mountain 5-day outlook, this is where we see a little bit more of that roller coaster of temperatures. A little bit of a similar situation for your desert 5-day outlook. And of course, we have those storms moving in. For KPBS News, I'm Anna Azalian.
They've been a tradition for decades. Fireworks over SeaWorld before it closes for the night. But now there are calls for those fireworks to happen less often. KPBS reporter John Carroll has a look at where the issue may go from here.
Who doesn't like fireworks? Those colorful explosions in the sky evoking a spirit of celebration and patriotism. But what brings joy to many instead brings dread to disabled vet Michael Davis and his cat, Angel.
As soon as she hears that noise, she's under the bed as far deep as she can get. And Angel had abuse in her first part of life, so she has PTSD.
The frequency at which SeaWorld shoots off fireworks has changed over the years. Generally speaking, though, you see and hear them most often over the summer months.
I would hear it from my constituents that were frustrated by the frequency of the fireworks.
San Diego City Council President Joe LaCava says he's been thinking about the issue for some time now.
How their pets react to this night after night of fireworks. That suggested to me that maybe now's the time to actually bring the conversation up.
LaCava says SeaWorld shoots off fireworks upwards of 150 nights a year. And he says he understands that from SeaWorld's perspective, the fireworks aren't just about entertainment.
The fireworks provide something later in the evening that maybe folks will stick around, maybe they'll buy a few of the merchandise or eat a dinner there, and so it becomes part of their business plan.
For Davis, the concern over the fireworks extends beyond the noise.
When you consider San Diego and how beautiful the area is, and beautiful Mission Bay is, if you think about all the years that SeaWorld's been doing this, there's probably a lot of gunk down there in the bay.
a concern shared by the council president.
There's been some allegations about some impacts to the natural environment in Mission Bay. We're still trying to study that and really trying to connect the dots between them because that's an important part of what makes Mission Bay special.
We requested an interview with a SeaWorld representative so we could ask questions about noise and environmental concerns. Instead, they provided a statement that did not mention fireworks. The city has been a great partner of ours for over 60 years, and we will continue to have conversations related to park offerings as we are constantly striving to update our entertainment and educational offerings. Neither Davis or LaCava are calling for the elimination of fireworks. LaCava says he'll urge the park to take a look at using drones, perhaps in combination with less frequent fireworks. That will happen in upcoming conversations, which LaCava says haven't started yet, but he says the city and SeaWorld will be talking.
They're looking at making some changes to their master plan. I don't know the scope of that, but that would be the opportunity. Changes in lease agreements do come to the city council.
Bottom line, the future of the fireworks is very much up in the air. John Carroll, KPBS News.
And here's a look at what we're working on for tomorrow in the KPBS newsroom. Some agencies are largely exempt from President Trump's hiring freeze, but as NPR's Morning Edition found out, they're hitting a new roadblock in onboarding staff. And KPBS Midday Edition is highlighting non-alcoholic beverages as part of a Wellness Wednesday episode. And you can find tonight's stories on our website, kpbs.org. Thanks for joining us. I'm Maya Trabulsi. Have a great evening.
Major funding for KPBS Evening Edition has been made possible in part by Bill Howe Family of Companies, providing San Diego with plumbing, heating, and air restoration, flood and remodeling services for over 40 years. Call 1-800-BILL-HOWE or visit billhowe.com. And by the Conrad Previs Foundation, Darlene Marcos Shiley, and by the following. And by viewers like you. Thank you.